person that visits my hometown is stunned at how nice and polite all of the residents are. We all walk around with smiles on our faces the whole time. They all just assume that we love our lives, but don't realize the threat that hangs over our heads. I am the father of a 4-year-old girl called Chloe. She was initially the youngest of 4, but now all of her siblings are gone. Chloe is a special child who is extremely talented at drawing. I cannot remember the last time I saw her without a pen or paper in her hand. Raising her has had its struggles, as I have also been taking care of my wife, who unfortunately suffered an accident, quote-unquote accident. Accident. I have had to carry her to the bathroom and feed her since then, and it has been exhausting. Earlier today, I decided to take Chloe shopping, and she eagerly hopped into the car with me. We were driving along at a steady pace when I was forced to jam on the brakes as a car passed me and almost hit me. I beeped my horn at them, and this tall, angry man jumped out of the car and began screaming at me. I knew right away that he wasn't a local and didn't know the rules. I glanced in the rearview mirror to see Chloe drawing furiously in the backseat. I nearly ran over the man as I sped away as he gave me the middle finger. I started talking to Chloe in the hopes of distracting her, but she was engrossed in her work. On our way back from the shops, I spotted the man's car lying forgotten at the side of the road. 2 police officers were standing there, staring at his headless corpse. The senior officer walked over and explained that there had been a traffic incident, while trying desperately not to glance towards my daughter. My daughter ran inside to play. When we got home and carried in the groceries. She left her drawings on the kitchen table, and I saw a picture of the angry man. The picture was almost perfect, except for the head, which she had rubbed out. I walked to the fridge and felt a tear running down my cheek as I gazed at the picture she had drawn of our family. The initial drawing had contained all of her older siblings, but she had a fight with them and erased them from the picture in a fit of rage. My wife had screamed at Chloe after her siblings had been erased from existence. She then slapped her across the face and sent her to bed without dinner. I could see the anger on Chloe's face as she walked out of the room and knew there would be repercussions. I was dragged out of my musings by the alarm going off, indicating it was time to feed my wife. I put together a quick meal and took a few quick breaths before walking into her bedroom. Her limbless torso lay on the bed, and I could smell the stench and knew she had an accident while we were away. I approached her carefully and tapped her on the side of the face to let her know I was there. My eyes kept being drawn back to her almost featureless face. Chloe had erased everything on her face, leaving just a mouth. She hadn't even given my wife a tongue, so we couldn't even communicate with each other. Every day I wonder if placing a pillow over her head and suffocating her would be a mercy at this point. I quickly clean her off before rushing out of the room. I walk into the kitchen to find Chloe sitting there drawing away with a smile on her face. I grab a hammer out of the drawer and for a second consider crushing in the back of her skull. I throw that thought away, as she is my daughter and I love her. I just hope that I never do anything that might upset her, as I don't want to end up like my wife. Wowie. Wowie, wowie, wowie. Girl with magical powers. Girl with magical powers, magical drawings. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. There is something sticky about my family vacation. By Beardify. All of this happened because I wanted to impress my girlfriend's older brother. All of this happened because I wanted to impress my girlfriend's older brother. Jeez, words are hard. I knew that the reservations were last minute, that I should have planned things better. But it was a busy week, okay? My workdays followed by slow and thick as molasses. The last thing I felt like doing when I got home was to scroll through online rentals. Besides, the place looked fine. I could feel Lara and her brother Enrique's eyes on me, impatient and judgmental, as I did a cursory click through. Stucco walls, badly painted, big airy rooms, full of outdated furniture, gravel, and cactuses in the garden. It wasn't exactly hip, but it was walking distance from the beach, and the price was reasonable. In fact, I was downright lucky to find anything this late in the game. Spring break was about to start, and the only other options left were either literal roach models or elite resorts, where a month's salary couldn't buy a single night. Lara sighed, and I booked the place. Later, in the bathroom, I realized I rushed so much that I hadn't even checked the guest reviews. Suddenly worried, I went back to my booking app and scanned them for any red flags. This was going to be my first vacation with my girlfriend Lara, her brother Enrique, and Enrique's wife, so I didn't want anything to go wrong. I breathed a sigh of relief. All 5 and 4 star reviews. In fact, there was only a single 1-star review, and it was only a single word. Sticky. It read. I had no idea what that meant, but it was a pretty old comment. Whatever had been sticky was probably fixed or cleaned up by now, I hoped. Enrique was a chef and he hated dirty kitchens, and Saul had a phobia of cockroaches. I told myself to quit worrying. Even the most perfect place was bound to have one bad review, right? As 6-hour drive after work brought us to the coast. It was twilight already. And the place wasn't exactly easy to find. In fact, the property owner included directions from the highway, since most GPS systems seemed to get it wrong. It was a good thing that they did too. All of those resort town streets started to look the same after a while, and my phone couldn't find the address. Fortunately, with the anonymous owner's directions in hand, I could still pretend that everything was under control. We arrived on time, and I realized that despite a tense start, we'd all gotten along pretty well, especially considering a long car ride and flaky air conditioning. It made me look at Lara and Enrique in a different way. This could be my family one day, I thought, and I was surprised by how comfortable I felt with the idea. Even so, I made a point of going into our rental house before the others. That way I figured I could fix, or at least cover up, anything that looked particularly ugly. I needn't have worried. The place looked just like the pictures. Looking back, maybe that should have been the first warning that something was wrong. Even the most honest owners used the angles and touched up photos to make their property stand out. But here, from the ugly orange curtains to the unfinished walls and the dead flowers in their terracotta vase, everything was exactly the same. Noise from the kitchen made me forget my worries. Enrique was already there, slicing cucumbers and tomatoes for a late dinner. I can't believe you found a place this big on such short notice. Lara squeezed my hand and led me to the bedroom she'd chosen for us. It was far from Enrique and Sol's, which I appreciated for obvious reasons. I drummed my fingers nervously on the door, hoping that no one else would come down the hall to glimpse what my girlfriend was doing on the bed. As I did, I realized that there seemed to be kind of sticky film, like a layer of something on the wood. Gross. I wiped my hands on my pants and closed the door. Dinner's ready, Enrique shouted about 15 minutes later. Laura and I stumbled out of the room, fixing our buttons and trying to act like we'd been unpacking. Has anyone seen Sol? I hadn't. Last I'd seen, she'd been out with the luggage. I should have checked on her earlier, I realized, but it had been hard to get out of bed. And not just because of Lara either. It was literally hard to push ourselves out of the mattress. It kept sagging, pulling us into itself. If I didn't know better, I would have thought it was holding on. While Lara and Enrique sat at the table, I went out front to look for Sol. I found her on the front stoop staring out at the night, her back to me. She was looking at something across the street. Isn't that odd? She whispered. Without turning around, I saw what she meant right away. Kokodik, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. The house on the other side of the street was a mirror image of this one. Less perfect maybe, less like the photos, but still eerily similar. I wondered if they both had the same owner. I turned to go inside. Hello, hello. How are you doing today? How are you doing today? Could you help me? Sol grabbed my shoulder. It's embarrassing, but it's like I stepped in glue or something. I can't lift lift up my feet. Sure enough, no amount of effort could prise those flip-flops from the concrete. Maybe she had stepped in glow. In the end, we just left them there. Whatever it was, it handled it better after a meal and a rest. In addition to tomato cucumber feta salad, there was curried chicken, wine, and sourdough bread from Enrique's restaurant. The perfect finish to a long day. At least it should have been, but I couldn't stop thinking about that greasy film on the door. How, just for an instant, it seemed to have trapped my fingers and the bed. The problem was, now I was feeling everywhere. On the plates, the table, the wine glasses. Even my bare feet. I quickly folded them under me and sat cross-legged on my stool. What could it be? Some kind of disinfectant that wasn't wiped up properly? The residue from a bug bomb or spilled oil? What? Lara kicked me under the table and I realized Sol had asked me a question. Did I want more wine? Absolutely. If I got a good buzz going, maybe I could enjoy myself and forget about... Hey, cuidado, Enrique laughed. I'm cutting you off, little sis. It just caught Lara, who'd almost fallen when she stood up to use the bathroom. It's not me, she blushed. That chair didn't want to let go. So I wasn't the only one. At least I knew I wasn't going crazy. There was only one thing to do. Tomorrow I'd wake up before the rest of them. I'd dig out some cleaning supplies from under the sink and give everything a good wipe down. Enrique grunted. At first I couldn't tell what was wrong. Then I realized Enrique's forearm was stuck to the table. He was one of those men who leaned forward when he spoke, so he'd probably been sitting like that throughout the entire meal. A little help? I don't know what's with this table. As Enrique pulled at his sleeve, I realized that stuck wasn't quite the right word. It was more like his arm had merged with the table somehow, and when he tugged at his sleeve, it was like tugging at his own skin. I moved to help him and realized I couldn't. I was stuck on my chair, so let out a low moan. I can't move my feet, she whimpered. Why can't I move my feet? Enrique was cutting at his sleeve with his steak knife, trying to free himself, but the place where his arm, the table met, was bleeding. If anything, he was more fused with it. I'd last looked a few seconds before. Sol started hyperventilating, but that was nothing compared with the screams coming from the bathroom. Lara. Help! My girlfriend shrieked from somewhere down the hallway. Can't. Help! The screams went on and on. It was useless. The more we struggled, the more we merged with the house. Help! Help! Lara sobbed from the bedroom. Help! It was like the house had swallowed her up. And it was doing the same to the rest of us. Gore pulled on the table where Enrique continued to fight for his arm. The effort had drenched him with sweat. Even when I looked away, I could hear those sickening sawing sounds. Knife cutting through something that wasn't quite wood and wasn't quite flesh. I can still hear them. With a triumphant grunt, Enrique peeled himself free, but only for a second. Since his shoes were stuck in the tile, the motion unbalanced him. He sprawled backwards onto the floor, squirming to keep his spine from touching the floor for too long. He fought with his laces, but they'd become just as sticky as the rest of the house. he was able to yank off his shoe. It would be like yanking off his foot. Everything in there had probably already fused into one disgusting union of polyester and flesh. Saul and I were going through the same thing. I'd figured out that by rocking back and forth just a little bit, I could slow the process, but that panicking seemed to speed it up. I fought to get my gasping breaths under control. Enrique was on his back, rolling from shoulder to shoulder, while I tried to free his feet, but with each motion the floor stuck to his back a little more. Sticky strands, a gum-like blend of skin, fabric and tile, appeared between his back and the ground, sucking him in. Waffle, hello. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Saul had been wearing a skirt, and it was easier for her at the time. Her to escape for the rest than for the rest of us. I'm okay. My stomach lurched each time she took a step and revealed the stretchy gunk trying to hold her feet on the floor. It made each step more difficult than the last. I winched when she almost lost her balance. One look at Enrique, who by now was just a mouth and nose disappearing into the kitchen floor, was enough to know what that would mean for her. She hadn't tried to help Enrique or me, but I couldn't hold that against her. Any person would think of themselves first in such an insane situation, and I wanted her to get away. If only she hadn't slammed into the door. When Saul's hand stuck to the knob, she finally lost her cool. The moment she slammed her shoulder into the door, it was over for her. She was going to become part of the house like the rest of us. Me? I'd accepted my fate the moment I saw what happened to Enrique. Because of how I was sitting, my ankles were stuck together, fused with each other and with the stool. The only way out would be sawing off my legs, and even then, I'd still land on that sticky, hungry floor. So here I sit, rocking methodically forward and backward, getting stuck just a little bit more each time, delaying the inevitable. It's taken me about 2 hours to type my story on mobile, and I still don't have service, but maybe this will slip through. Of course, by then, I'll already be part of the house. How's it, the people? I don't know what we're doing. Don't know what we're doing today. I was Bye. Signed, Sarge. Delivered. Alright, I was a terrible brother. I posted about my situation a few days ago and got a whole bunch of really helpful comments on how to get my brother back. Here's an update. I was especially convinced by user Reassoable Pack 067's suggestion that I look out for signs of Mike around me in case he's now taken the original place of that boy in the spirit world and was wondering how I was trying to reach out to me. I decided to research the shit out of similar occurrences to see what I could do for Mike. I found a medium. I decided against an exorcist purely because I found a nun that seemed both legitimate and non-violent. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing Mike's body being held down, struggling tooth and nail, his veins turning black as that evil asshole was torn from his body. Yes, I watched way too many exorcisms on TV. This medium seemed to be known for being able to get through to ghosts peaceful way, to meditate matters between the spirits and the living in a peaceful way. She had apparently once been a psychologist before embracing her psychic nature and becoming a medium. I hoped that thing, Jimmy, would somehow be able to be reasoned with. I vetted her the way I would vet anyone I'm thinking of hiring. I checked out her reviews on multiple platforms, read through her qualifications, and even reached out to some of her past clients to check in with them about her. I think it spoke volumes that most of the past clients I reached out to were willing to chat with me, just to convince me how awesome she had been for them. "Come in," I said awkwardly, gesturing to the open doorway. At the back of my mind, I was wondering about her boldness, meeting strangers, being alone with a guy in an empty house. Then again, it was broad daylight, and in this town there was no going anywhere without having been seen by someone. She seemed almost to drift into the house, so natural and graceful were her movements. She looked around slowly, seeming to take in the essence of the house, or so I assumed. I had no idea how mediums functioned. Her gaze lighted on the waist-high drawer by the kitchen. She murmured. "Yes, do you sense something?" I asked nervously. "Feeling a little foolish. That space seems to hold a lot of positive energy, happy memories, but I'm not really sure how. It seems to just be a drawer," she mused. I felt my upper cheeks and eyes heat up as tears began to prickle. That's where Mike would climb onto when he wanted piggyback rides," I said, my voice gruff. "Oh," she looked at me with sympathy in her eyes. "You really care for him." I gave a quick nod and averted my eyes. "We have a good hour or so before anyone else comes home before that thing comes back," I said briskly. Please look around, tell me if you sense anything. If you sense Mike. She smiled gently and nodded. I will, she said, then hesitated. Mike, if he's now in, well, spirit form, he would be pretty new a spirit, and may not yet have the strength or ability to make himself visible or audible to you, even with the rituals. If I do find traces of him, I will have to interpret him for you. Do whatever you need to do. You have to help Mike, please. I will. Trust me. I will do everything in my power to help. The earnestness in her eyes was unmistakable. I followed her around the house from a distance, wanting to give her as much space as she needed. She didn't have any sage, crystal spells, or any of the things I had associated with mediums. I guess I had never actually looked into how mediums practiced. It had never even crossed my mind to give credence to any of that type of activity in the past. It was in Mike's room that she paused and closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she knelt down next to the bed and placed her hand on a spot on the bed, almost tenderly. She stared at the space above her hand, a look of sorrow crossing her face. I don't see him here. He's not yet strong enough to form a spiritual body, but I feel him here. His energy, his spirit is here. And he feels so sad. As she spoke, tears began to well in her eyes. He feels lost. I sense regret, sadness, and that he misses his family. He misses you. I gulped, feeling a surge of sorrow overwhelm me. I couldn't speak for fear it would erupt. He's so frightened, she added, and tears spilled from her eyes. I couldn't bear it. I left the room, sobbing. She gave me some time to calm down and only joined me a while later. I need to talk to the other boy, the one in his body, Jimmy, right? I need to convince him to leave, of his own free will. That will cause the least amount of harm to Mike. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure the boy could be reasoned with. But that was the whole purpose of her being here after all. Just tell my parents you're Kane's cousin. Come to visit. Kane's my buddy. He'd cover for me, if need be. Say that you're here to interview for the temporary babysitting gig. I said, I really hope they wouldn't call Kane to check. Kane would cover for me, no doubt, but I'd have to explain things to him after, which I wanted to avoid as much as possible. She frowned. I don't like lying to others. I stared at her pleadingly. Please, they wouldn't allow you to talk to Jimmy otherwise, or hang out here at all. They don't believe me about what happened to Mike. They'd blow a fuse if they knew you were a medium, if they knew I hired you. She thought for a while, frown creasing her brows, and nodded. I thanked her, relieved. Then we waited for my parents and that boy to come home. Luckily, my parents seemed to take her very quickly. They tended to be guarded, cautious around others, especially when it came to potential babysitters to whom they might be entrusting their precious little boy. Perhaps it was her aura, some sense they had about her, but they very quickly warmed up to her and invited her to stay for dinner to get to know her more. That boy, on the other hand, was immediately on edge upon seeing her. He seemed to somehow guess at what she was. He hid his discomfort well, but I could see his gaze repeatedly sliding back to her face throughout dinner. Dinner went well. My parents were all ready to give her the job. She seemed kind of funny, sweet, and they were sorely in need of a babysitter, especially since I had steadfastly refused to watch over Mike for the past year. I like to talk to my potential clients one-on-one to get to know them better, to see if they're comfortable with me. Would you mind if I did that? She asked my parents as she was helping to clear the dishes. I saw Jimmy freeze. Worried that my parents would notice his fear, I piped up. I'll join them, make sure things are fine. I saw the surprised looks on my parents' faces. They seemed pleased that I wanted any contact at all with that little shit, and quickly agreed. We headed to Mike's room, Jimmy looking nervous and tense. Jimmy, right? She said, as the door shut. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm Mike, the little shit retorted. It's okay. I'm not here to make you do anything. I just want to understand you, how you're feeling, what you're doing here, what you hope to achieve. Jimmy remained sullenly quiet. Here, she said, holding out a hand, palm up to Jimmy. Sense it yourself. You can sense others' feelings and intentions if you try right, especially with contact. I felt a rush of anger. So that was how it was able to so easily manipulate Mike. It could sense Mike's feelings, Mike's intentions, probably sense Mike's pureness. Jimmy reluctantly reached out and held her hand. He frowned for a moment or two, then relaxed visibly. You do want to help me, said to her. It was my turn to frown. Help him? She wanted to help him. An alarm went off in my mind. Yes, I want to help you. I want to help Mike too. Mike is really sad, Jimmy, she said, and the tension eased in my body. Okay, she seems to be on Mike's side, I thought. Jimmy let go of her hand and looked away, a surly look clouding his face. He promised. He agreed to this. That goaded me. I opened my mouth to yell at him, but she silenced me with a stare. He did, Jimmy, because he cared for you. Because he really likes you, maybe even loves you. You're his friend, and he wanted to help you, make you happy, she said, her tone filled with sincerity. Then he can help me. By keeping his promise. I got his body for 2 years. Despite my anger, I felt a tight knot within loosen a little. It seemed Jimmy did intend to return Mike's body eventually, or so he said. Yes, Jimmy, but he didn't know it would be so dark, so scary, where he has to be, so lonely. He can't even speak to you, Jimmy. He can't even form a body or a voice. He's so afraid, so sad. Jimmy looked away, and I was shocked to see a tinge of guilt and sadness flickering on his face. Did that thing have some humanity? That's where I was for years too, before I managed to show myself to him, to anyone, he insisted. Yes, Jimmy, it must have been so scary for you too. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. I wish you didn't have to. It must have been so lonely. Jimmy began to cry. It was, he whimpered. You're going to pass out. Well, that's good. That is good. But Jimmy, you learned to cope. And Mike, this is his body. His life. yet he was willing to lend it to you, out of the kindness of his heart and his love for you. And he hasn't learned to cope, she continued. He will learn, Jimmy said, his tears stopping, his voice hardening. But Jimmy, you can go. You can go off and be happy. You can leave this world behind and finally be happy, at peace. I've spoken to many like you, I've sent them on to the next place, and so often, right before they pass from our world, they are able to tell me how calm they feel, how happy, how at peace. That they sense a beautiful bliss from the place they're headed into. Jimmy looked up with a mix of curiosity, wonder, and caution on his face. Hold my hand, see if I'm telling you the truth, she said, once again offering her hand to him. Jimmy held it, and his eyes widened slowly. You mean it? He asked in a small voice. The next place is a good place. She smiled, a warm, soothing beam that seemed to cast the room in tenderness. Yes, from all I've gathered, yes, indeed. Jimmy was silent for a long time. Please, Jimmy, I couldn't help chiming in. I tried to make my tone as gentle and even as possible. To my surprise, my voice sounded warm. My revulsion towards Jimmy seemed to have faded. There was still resentment, anger, and bitterness, but at a much lesser intensity than before. Maybe it was that look of sadness, or his look of fear and forlornness when he had talked about his past. Or maybe it was the fact that he was starting to seem more and more human to me, more and more like an ordinary little boy, not the devil I thought him to be. I immediately felt guilt for feeling any ounce of compassion for Jimmy, the one who had cast my brother in the darkness, and for the gentle way that I was speaking to him. It's all for Mike, I told myself and continued. I love Mike. I miss him. I know he misses me too. It's sad your life was short, that it was difficult for you, but this is Mike's life. This is Mike's family, and I want him back so bad. Jimmy blinked and tears came into his eyes again. But I want to feel it. I want to experience that. To have family who cares. I've been so happy with them. Gestured towards the door, indicating my parents. You will be happy and safe, and in a good place, good people, as you move on, she said. Jimmy was silent again, save for little sobs. Then he finally spoke. I want you to be my big brother, just for a while. Be nice to me. Be to me like you were with Mike, he said, pleading with me with his eyes. I froze. I wasn't up for it. He was not my brother. I couldn't possibly treat him like he was Mike. Mike is the only one who would ever be my brother. He saw the look on my face and spoke again. Just a day, please. A full day of being my big brother. I want to know how Mike felt with you. I tried to swallow the sense of distance and sickness I felt, treating him like I would Mike, after he had tricked Mike out of his body. But it would get Mike back. You promised to leave after, I asked, forcing down the sudden rush of nausea. His face brightened. Yes, I do. I promise. jaw tightened, then I nodded. There was nothing else for it. This better get me my brother back. I woke up early the next morning with dread and hope in my heart, treating Jimmy like he was Mike. That was going to be rough. Wanted a really good day, a happy last hurrah for him before he let Mike back into his body. And now I knew he could sense intentions and feelings, so I guessed I was going to have to rustle up all my compassion and goodwill to appease him. The medium had reassured me that she sensed sincerity in Jimmy, and that had really helped drain a lot of the vitriol that had remained in me. It had also poured hope into my heart. If he would really return my brother, if he was really going to leave this world after this one day, then I could probably afford to show him some warmth for the day. I got dressed and went into the dining area. He was there, all dressed and ready to go. "Hi, Matt," he yelled. "Hey, Mikey," I said as cheerfully as I could. I ignored the look of surprise and disbelief that bloomed on my mother's face. His face glowed with a beatific smile. "You ready to head out?" I asked. Unnaturally jovial, I cringed at the forced tone of my voice. Luckily, Jimmy didn't seem to mind. He nodded enthusiastically and jumped up, all ready to go. He looked just like an innocent, excitable kid. I couldn't help but feel a tiny bit touched. I'll treat him like he's Mike today. I'll forget it's Jimmy. I'll give Jimmy that, since it's the one thing he needs before he leaves, I thought. This is Mike. This is Mike, I repeated to myself. "Come on, let's go then," I called out. My mom's jaw dropped further. Jimmy ran back to give each of my parents a tight hug and a kiss goodbye. We headed to the library. Yes, the library. The kid had chosen, of all places, the library to spend the first half of the day at. I suggested ice cream, theme parks, the ice rink, but no, he wanted the library. "Why do you want to go to the library, Jimmy?" Jimmy paused, looking at me with an expression of sadness and nostalgia. It was odd to see nostalgia on the little kid's face. "I ran away once, when I was alive. I ran all the way to the library and hid there. I saw a boy there, his dad. His dad was reading to him from a book, and the boy was asking him about all the words he didn't understand. I felt so weird. I was really sad, but also happy watching them." Jimmy's gaze seemed far away as he spoke. Then he looked at me and said quietly, "I want that today." I nodded, my heart going out to him. At the same time, I felt fear. I still didn't like that I was feeling for this boy. After all, I wasn't sure if he'd return Mike to me. I swiped my fears to the back of my mind and nodded. "You'll get that today, Jimmy." We spent a good half of the day just reading at the library. Jimmy sat by my side, picking up books he wanted, reading some pages, but mostly getting me to read him. He asked many questions about words, characters, why people did the things they did. I was beginning to realize that he was truly just a kid, a lonely kid. By the time we left the library, I felt a fondness for him that I could never have imagined developing just a day ago. Of course, I was still worried about Mike and whether I'd get him back, but after the hours spent together, I was more and more convinced that Jimmy meant Mike no harm, that he'd keep his promise. Or that's what you want to believe, the unsettling thought niggled in my mind. We had a quick lunch after that, then and to the park. Jimmy wanted to play with dogs at the park. He had always had a love for dogs, and the man he lived with never allowed him near one, or let him have one. I sat on the bench and watched as he ran about excitedly, approaching different dogs and patting them whenever he could. I looked at the joy bursting from him, listened to his squeals of delight, and felt a rush of endearment towards him. The dogs seemed to like him all right too. That to me is always a sign of a good person. I mean, dogs were supposed to be extra sensitive and stuff, right? I marveled at his energy as the hours passed. He had been running around for a full 2 hours. I went to get us ice cream, which only seemed to make him even more psyched. "They are so cute! There are so many dogs here," he shrilled. I couldn't help laughing. "Yes, kiddo, there are." He plopped down next to me on the bench, happily eating his ice cream. "I'm so happy," he said, his voice suddenly gentle. I reached out and ruffled his hair before I could stop myself. He looked up at me, eyes brimming with tears. We said nothing for a long while. Our medium showed up soon after as planned, and she came lugging a big bag. I frowned. "Is that medium stuff?" She laughed and said, "No, this is picnic stuff. Jimmy here wanted a picnic to end of the day, right?" Jimmy nodded excitedly. I gaped as she pulled out the mat, plates, cups, flasks, Tupperwares, and a whole bunch of picnic paraphernalia. I had always thought picnics just meant, buying a sandwich and eating it at a bench or something. Yeah, my family wasn't big to picnics. She had prepared a huge feast we helped set up, then tucked into the food court, chatting, laughing, enjoying the sunshine. As the sun set, we lay quietly on the mat, watching the burning amber swirls in the sky. "I don't want this day to end," Jimmy piped up in a small voice. "I wish this could last forever." I felt sadness, then a tightness in my gut, and a cold fear. Jimmy had better not go back on his words. "I know," the medium said softly. "Jimmy, we're going to have all these wherever you're going. I'm certain of it. You're going to have people who love you, the way Matt loves Mike." I turned and felt a wave of relief as I saw Jimmy nod. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jimmy nodded again. "He's here," she said. "Mike's with me." I dropped by the house for him before we got here. I immediately felt nauseated. Mike was here, watching me enjoy the day with Jimmy, betraying him by treating this boy like he was Mike. My face paled. The medium seemed to sense my thoughts. "He's happy you guys had fun," she said. "He wants Jimmy to have a good day before he leaves." Relief welled up, combined with an intense admiration for Mike's kindness. Mike truly has a beautiful soul. "Bye, Matt," Jimmy said softly. "Bye, Jimmy," I said, a tremble in my voice. I watched as he closed his eyes. Soon, a cloud of dark smoke left Mike's body, triggering an overwhelming rush of relief within me. It hovered in the air for a few moments. Then the medium gently placed her hands near the dark smoke and closed her eyes. Nothing seemed to happen for a while. Then the smoke slowly dispersed, and he was gone. I thought I detected some sparkles in the air, but that could have been my imagination. "Mike? Mike, you okay?" I shook Mike. Mike stirred. "Maddie?" He spoke in a small voice, the unmistakable voice of my little brother. My heart leapt. Mikey, I yelled, and Bear hugged him, tears pouring down my face. My little brother was back. I've got my little brother back. I began to sob uncontrollably. The immense rock of shame and guilt I'd been carrying around finally beginning to crumble. You saved me, he whispered, and buried his face in my chest. I smiled through my tears. I got my brother back. That was nice. That was nice. Very nice. Very nice. Well, that's about all I have time for